Hello, this is Brian Oughton of Apologetics315. Today's interview is with David Wood. David is a former atheist who converted to Christianity after examining the evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. As well as being a teaching fellow in philosophy, David directs Acts 17 Apologetics Ministries, defending the Christian faith against atheistic and Islamic objections. In this interview, I'll be asking David more about his testimony, his insights into Islam, and his advice for Christians doing Islamic studies and apologetics. Thanks for joining me today, David.
Good to be here.
David, as I was preparing a good date for this interview, we had to wait until the Dearborn Arab Festival was over in Michigan. Could you tell our listeners a little bit more about that festival and what you were doing there?
Well, the Dearborn Arab Festival, it's not a religious festival. It's an Arab festival, kind of like, say, Oktoberfest in Germany, celebration of German culture or something like that.
Yeah.
But at the Arab festival, you have Arab food and Arab music, things like that, and people come from all around the country, sometimes from overseas. But it's not just a Muslim festival. There are Muslims there. I would estimate that roughly half the people who go there, maybe a little more, are Muslims. But you also have lots of Arab Christians and then non-Arabs who are just showing up for the festival. But what you have there is you have a situation where over 300,000 people are showing up to have a festival there in Dearborn, Michigan. And lots of Christians and lots of Muslims as well see that as an opportunity to preach a message. So if you're a Christian, we're told to bring the message to all people, to make disciples of all nations. And here we have a situation where all in one place you have people from Iraq and people from Egypt and people who came to the United States from all around the world, immigrated here, and they gather together for the Arab Festival in the city that has the highest percentage of Arabs anywhere in the country. Dearborn, Michigan has roughly about 30% Muslim population there in Dearborn. And so lots of Christians show up, and you have, of course, the total spectrum of Christian evangelists. You have some who are very nice and, just want to get into a conversation with a Muslim. And so, they'll stand on the corner and try to hand out some tracts or something like that, maybe even be outside the festival for when Muslims are walking home and try to get into a conversation with them. And then you have, at the other end of the spectrum, you have people holding up signs saying Muhammad was a pedophile and stuff like that. So you have a pretty interesting mix there at the festival. And I show up to, kind of see what needs to be done. If there are any problems there, then, I want to make sure that the truth is known. And what I mean by that is you often have someone maybe starting to pick on the Christians, even the nice Christians. And so, I try to make sure everyone's okay. I've gone to the festival for the past 4 years. In the first year, I just showed up and started passing out DVDs, Christian DVDs, copies of the New Testament, things like that. And when we got back the next year, things had changed, and we weren't allowed to hand out materials or to distribute anything. That the police actually said no one was going to be allowed to distribute materials, even on the public sidewalks around the festival. And so, there, I'd showed up to hand out materials and wasn't able to. And so Nabil was there with me, and we decided, we'd try to get in a conversation with some Muslims at a booth. And that ended up being a pretty famous video on YouTube. I think we got 2 million and some change views because security, one of whom had Hezbollah tattooed down their arm. These are some lovely guys to have running security at a festival, but they actually started slapping us around a little bit. And so things kind of what we do there has kind of changed over the years, depending on what other people are doing. If other people are, going after Christians, and we're going to try and, film it to make sure they have a record so that no one lies about what happened later on. And if we have an opportunity to get into some conversations, that's good. And what I've done for the most part when I get a chance is some of the other Christian evangelists who are there, who are having a discussion, if they run into a Muslim who wants to argue and wants to, in other words, engage in apologetics, here's my evidence, what do you have? Then several times over the past few years, people have kind of pointed those Muslims in my direction so that I could discuss the Quran and the Bible with them.
Well, obviously you're real involved there, and anyone who's followed your ministry or your blog knows that last year there was quite a scene with arrests for disturbing the peace. Just so our listeners have more of a background of what happened last year, can you describe these arrests?
Well, last year we went to the festival, and we, again, weren't allowed to distribute any materials. But given what had happened at the previous festival, getting slapped around by security guards, we wanted to make sure that this problem had been taken care of, that Christians are free to have discussions or ask questions to Muslims. And so, we had talked to police. We could have pressed charges on the security guards. We decided not to. But we wanted to make sure at the festival that everything was going smoothly. And it certainly wasn't. We were walking around at the festival, and Nabil got into a conversation with some young Muslims. I guess that the group is maybe 15 or 16-year-olds. And they started asking him questions which are the standard questions that Muslims have from Christians. Things like, how can you believe God died? Or when did Christians start believing in the deity of Christ? And hasn't your Bible been corrupted? So they're asking these basic questions, which are the main questions young Muslims would ask of a Christian. Nabil starts answering them. And before we know it, police come upon us, and I was standing there just recording. They were more interested in talking to Nabil because he's a former Muslim. And so a police officer came up behind me and said, "Excuse me, sir." And so I thought he wanted to get by, so I stepped to the side. But as soon as I started stepping to the side, he actually grabbed me and put me in handcuffs. And then they arrested Paul and Nabil as well. We didn't know it, but they had already arrested Nagin, who was there with us. And so they put all four of us in jail that night, and some friends came and bailed us out the next day. But it's something I've noticed over the past several years dealing with Muslims, is that nothing tends to set Muslims off here in the West more than talking to some young Muslims and explaining Christianity to them. Every time I've ever talked to like a 14 or 15 or 16-year-old Muslim, some people are coming by to break that up by any means necessary. And what they did last year was, all the Muslims started calling in complaints to police, saying, they're out here harassing people, they're starting a riot, and this and that. And police came and threw us in jail.
I've seen this video from last year. It is rather interesting. I wonder if you've gotten responses from people saying, you're just going there to pick a fight. What do you say to people who would say that you're just going there to provoke conflict?
Well, we were actually as careful as we possibly could be not to provoke conflict. So at the 2009 festival, when security started slapping us around, people said, it's because you went up to a booth and had a camera rolling and you filmed people and they didn't want to get filmed. Now, that's not correct. The Muslims at the booth gave us permission to record them. So that's wrong. But in 2010, we said, all right, we're not even going to do that. We're not going to walk up to anyone and start recording them. We'll have a camera pointed just at us. And then if anyone wants to come up to us, they see we have a camera there. And if anyone wants to come up to us, they're free to do so. And if you go to the festival, you see there are cameras everywhere. Everyone's walking around recording with iPhones or with video cameras. So cameras are all over the festival. We recorded just ourselves, so we're doing everything we can to make sure that no one can say you were trying to cause a scene or trying to start a fight or something like that. So we just record ourselves, and everyone who comes up to us knows that, there's a camera 4 feet away, and so they understand they're being recorded. And they arrested us anyway. And it's a big concern to see that happening in the United States. And anyone who says you're going there to cause a problem, I mean, what? We're at a festival. Recording ourselves, and that's somehow deliberately provoking, Muslims to attack us or something. It's a strange way of thinking, I think.
Again, it is amazing when you watch the video just to see the response of the police to what is really nothing happening, and to be arrested for it is shocking. I started out the interview wanting to highlight your involvement there, not only to show what sort of ministry you're involved with, but I have seen and have been kind of shocked at the influx of Islam and its permeation. And so I'm wondered, in your view, what sort of growth do you see in Islam in the U.S., and why do you think it's so important for Christians to be equipped to answer it?
Well, I've heard various statistics about the growth of Islam in the United States. I've heard 20,000 a year, I've heard 30,000 a year, I've heard 35,000 a year converts to Islam. So those are the standard figures that you'll hear, 20,000, 30,000, somewhere 20 to 30,000, somewhere in that ballpark, maybe 35. Statistics also show that within a couple years, roughly half of those people who have converted to Islam will leave Islam for one reason or another. So you're dealing with thousands of converts, which in a country of 300 million people isn't a tremendous amount. You also have immigration, though, so Muslims immigrating to the United States, and you have Muslim birth rates tend to be a bit higher than non-Muslim birth rates. I don't know of any statistics specifically in the United States, but in Europe, for example, Muslim birth rates are about 3 times higher than those of non-Muslims. So you put all this together, and Islam is going to grow. Now, that's in itself, the growth of a religion shouldn't be, making us think there's going to be some sort of political disaster. I mean, Mormonism is growing, Scientology is growing, atheism is growing. But with Islam, the situation is a bit different, because Islam, unlike any other religion I know of, has a lot to say about unbelievers and how unbelievers are to be treated. So you can compare this with, say, Christianity or Judaism, where the teachings of Christianity are meant for the church. When you read, say, the letters of Paul, most of that has to do with how Christians are supposed to live. You don't open it and say, here's what you must make unbelievers do, and here you preach to the unbeliever, but that in itself is a command to Christians. This is what Christians are supposed to do, and so the teachings are about Christians themselves. And similar with Judaism, here's what, in the Old Testament, here's what you do in your land. Here's how you guys are supposed to deal with people in your land. It says nothing about going around the world and forcing everyone to convert or anything like that. So, and that's pretty standard among the world's religions, is that the teachings are directed to people who actually believe in the religion. Islam is different in that Sharia applies not just to Muslims, it applies to everyone once Islam has taken over a society. So Muhammad taught all kinds of things about how unbelievers are to be treated. And when you examine what Islam says about unbelievers and how we are to be treated under Islamic rule, you're not going to like it. It's some bad stuff with respect to teachings about women, with respect to teachings about all kinds of things. Islam, we'd have a problem with Sharia itself, but Islam specifically has commands about Christians and Jews and pagans. And so, it's very strange for me to hear so many people saying, you're an Islamophobe. If you're worried about the spread of Islam, or you're an Islamophobe or a racist or a bigot for looking into these teachings. Wait a minute. Here's a religion which is growing, and in the religion, if it grows to a certain point, it's commanded to take over, and it's commanded to do certain things to me and to my children. Well, who wouldn't be concerned about that? So that's why we should, here in the West especially, be concerned about the growth of Islam.
Yeah, well, that's good information. Much of our interview, I want to focus on Islam and how Christians can better interact with Muslim friends, give good answers to objections coming from Islam. But before we do that, I think our listeners would be interested in hearing about how you actually became a Christian and then how you got interested in Islam.
Well, as far as becoming a Christian, that's actually a pretty long story. I'm going to put out a video on it here, maybe in a month or so. It's actually kind of long and bloody, but the basic idea is I grew up as an atheist. I don't remember ever believing in God when I was young, and the short version would be one day I messed with the wrong Christian, and I had gotten used to sort of bullying Christians, not in a physical sense of bullying them, but bullying them intellectually, and raising all these objections to Christianity. And almost every Christian I'd ever run into just backed down immediately. Hey, you just have to know it in your heart. And I'd say, well, I don't know it in my heart. And they say, oh, you just have to believe. And I thought that was just ridiculous. And one day I started messing with a Christian, and this guy just tore me to pieces, and I didn't know what was happening. I thought I was smarter than him, and here he was just ripping me to shreds. And so he actually made me want to study Christianity more to win the argument against him. And so I went, and I understood even back then that Christianity stands or falls with the resurrection of Jesus. And so I went right after that, and I tried to refute the resurrection. Now the problem is that I'm not hyper skeptical, but I'm a bit skeptical by nature, but I'm not hyper skeptical to where no amount of evidence is ever going to convince me of something that I disagree with. And I think lots of people who are the champions in the atheist community are like that. It doesn't really matter what the evidence is; it's not going to convince them. But I wasn't like that. And so when I actually started studying the resurrection, I thought I was going to find absolute nonsense, no historical evidence, everything Christians are saying is wrong. And I found out, well, there's a ton of evidence that Jesus died by crucifixion. And there's a ton of evidence that he was alive again after he died. And so here, all the evidence I have tells me this guy died, and all the evidence I have tells me this guy was alive again after he died. That sounds like a miracle. And, well, if I'm going to listen to anyone tell me about God, it would be the one who rose from the dead. And so there's certainly a lot more to it than that, but it's a rough sketch of how I became a Christian.
From there, I mean, you become a Christian. What gets you interested in Islam?
Well, I actually started studying Islam before I was a Christian. So when I was still an atheist, I started studying Islam a little bit, wasn't impressed, went on to study other things. And after I became a Christian, I ended up with an imam, that's a leader of a mosque. I ended up with a Muslim imam as a weightlifting partner. So we'd actually go to the gym and be lifting weights and discussing Islam versus Christianity. And so I started studying Islam mainly because my friend was a Muslim. And back then I was a brand new Christian. I didn't know how to act. I hadn't grown, and so when we argued, it was a nasty affair. We weren't nice, and we ended up, I guess, for about a year or so we were friends, and after that we were, we didn't like each other much because we were both really nasty. So, later on I learned, hey, wait a minute, I'm probably not supposed to act like I did when I was originally a Christian. But I had learned a lot about Islam during that period, and later on, of course, became friends with Nabil Qureshi. Nabil and I became best friends, and he was a Muslim and actually tried to convert me to Islam. And so here, my best friend's a Muslim, and it was actually cool because it never occurred to us that if you're friends with someone, you're not going to criticize their beliefs. I knew that he had my best interest in mind, and he knew that I had his best interest in mind. And so, when he would say, Jesus never died, or Jesus never claimed to be God, or your Bible's been corrupted, and I would say, Muhammad's a false prophet, and the Quran's not the word of God, we understood, hey, I'm not trying to hurt your feelings here. I'm actually trying to help you, and that kept us together for a long time. But that was actually the main reason I started studying Islam, was just my best friend was a Muslim. If my best friend back then had been a Mormon, I don't know, maybe I'd be involved in Mormonism right now. Because really, given my background, I'm more interested in atheism. That's what if I had to pick something to deal with, I'm most interested in the topic of atheism and offering evidence for the existence of God. But after running into Nabil, ended up studying it for a period of several years. And then Nabil, of course, becomes a Christian. And so, my first instinct after Nabil became a Christian was, now I'm done. I'm done studying Islam. I can get back to atheism, which I'm much more interested in. But then then I saw what happens when a Muslim converts to Christianity, and it was World War III in his family and in his community and all his cousins, everyone else. It's hey, you're wrong, you're an idiot, you're a horrible person, you're in rebellion for leaving Islam, and we're going to come and refute you. And his dad started making him go to all these Muslim scholars all over the place to lead him back to Islam, and so my reaction to all that was, hey, you're not gonna just mess with my buddy like that. You're gonna be messing with both of us. So then I ended up continuing to study Islam because, well, now my friend was being attacked by Muslims from all around the world, and so never actually got away from it. And I think it's a good thing, because in the Christian community there are tons of apologists working on offering arguments for the existence of God and refuting people like Richard Dawkins and other atheists. And there's comparatively, I'd say, much less emphasis on refuting the arguments of Islam. And so, even though I'm more interested in atheism, I think it is important that I'm dealing with Islam right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, tell me a bit about Acts 17 Apologetics Ministry, what it is, what you're actively involved in right now.
I'm trying, and I'm starting to get back to dealing with some atheism issues, and I've been dealing with the problem of evil for a long time. That's actually my area in philosophy, is the problem of evil, the argument from evil. As far as Islam goes, I have a blog. We do debates. I've done, I guess, around 30 public debates over the past 3 or 4 years, most of them with Muslims. And so we have a blog where we make videos, apologetics videos, and post articles and such, current events. And apart from that, Sam Shamoun and I we do a television show called Jesus or Muhammad, and it's a pretty cool setup. There's an Arab satellite. Arabs around the world get this satellite when they leave the Middle East. They get this particular satellite because it beams all the Arab channels into their houses. So you pay a certain fee, get the satellite, and then you have access to all the Arab channels. Well, there's a Christian TV station called ABN that broadcasts Christian programs into those Arab households, which I know. I have an Arab friend named George, and he said he's never been into a Muslim house that didn't get those satellite channels. But ABN started broadcasting Christian programs into there, and eventually they started getting requests for English programs, because they said, hey, we come to the United States and we come to Europe and we come to Australia, and we speak Arabic, but our children are speaking English, and so could you have some English shows? And so they started one called Jesus or Muhammad, and basically we deal with one topic per show, and we address it for about half an hour, and then it's a live call-in show. And so you have Muslims calling in, Muslim scholars calling in. We have debates on there, and so it turns out to be it's pretty fun, and we see lots of things happening. In fact, Nagin, who was arrested with us last year at the festival, that's actually she started calling in the show when she was still a Muslim, and we've gotten lots of feedback from people saying that they were thinking of converting to Islam, but they watched the show and they stopped. Or we've heard from Muslims who were watching the show and later left Islam. And so, yep, that's pretty much what's going on now.
Well, excellent. Now, shifting gears and talking about more in depth on some of the issues of Islam. You mentioned earlier how the resurrection and your evaluation of the evidence was persuasive to you. But Muslims deny that Jesus died on the cross. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering, how do you argue historically that Jesus actually died on the cross when you're engaging with a Muslim?
Well, this is actually, I think, one of the most important topics in dealing with Muslims. And I don't just mean the crucifixion. I mean approaching the crucifixion and our apologetics approach in general. Apologetics in the West developed, for the most part over the past several decades as a response to skeptics and atheists and things like that. And what I find is that lots of people approach Muslims and respond to Muslims like they're responding to atheists. So if a Muslim says, hey, your Bible's been corrupted, the response is, well, let's examine the textual criticism, and I'll show you through a study of, manuscripts that the Bible hasn't been corrupted. Not realizing that the Muslim's view of the Bible has absolutely nothing to do with that Muslim ever examining any evidence. It has nothing to do with that. And similarly, the Muslim's view of the crucifixion has nothing to do with that Muslim ever examining the evidence for the crucifixion, realizing, the evidence just doesn't fit. The evidence just isn't quite enough, or the evidence shows that Jesus didn't die by crucifixion. It has nothing to do with that. It's just based on a verse of the Quran, Surah 4, verse 157, which says that Jesus didn't die by crucifixion. Instead, it was made to appear to people as if Jesus died. And the standard Muslim interpretation is that someone, most likely Judas, was crucified in Jesus' place after being disguised by Allah. So Allah took someone, again, probably Judas, made him look like Jesus, and then Judas was crucified, but everyone thought that it was Jesus because Allah had disguised this person to make him look like Jesus, but actually Jesus was safe in heaven. And so, it is, of course, important to explain the evidence. Hey, we have Christian sources, we have Jewish sources, we have Roman sources. Everyone agrees Jesus died. Every shred of evidence we have tells us that Jesus died. That's important. It's important to note that we have a scholarly consensus on that. You can go to even people who are very critical of Christianity, people like Bart Ehrman or the Jesus Seminar. They all regard Jesus' death by crucifixion as one of the best established facts of ancient history, certainly the best fact we know about Jesus other than his existence. So we have a ton of historical evidence, but I find with Muslims that doesn't really get to the heart of the matter, because they're not basing their view on any kind of evidence. They're basing it on what the Quran says. And so when I address this issue with Muslims, really one of the easiest approaches is to just open the Quran, look at the Surah 4, verse 157, ask the Muslim what happened, and the Muslim is most likely going to tell you Judas was crucified instead of Jesus, and that Allah disguised him. And so in that situation, I'm not going to go into history. I'm going to say, why would Allah do that? Why would Allah trick people into believing that Jesus died on the cross? That became one of the central teachings, one of the three core elements of the Christian gospel, Jesus' death by crucifixion. And you're telling me Allah tricked people into believing that, even though it's not true. And so, at that point, I say, look, you tell me Christianity is a corruption of Jesus' message. Well, who corrupted it? One of the false teachings of Christianity, according to Islam, is that Jesus died on the cross. Jesus died by crucifixion. Well, who started that false belief? Well, you can't blame the Apostle Paul here. You can't blame the Council of Nicaea. You can't blame any of the people that Muslims would normally blame for corrupting Christianity. You're blaming Allah for helping to start at least, the world's largest false religion. And so rather than go to a solely historical approach, again, it's good to point out the historical facts. But really, the point that the Muslim needs to understand is when they say something like that, they're telling us something about God. They're telling us that Allah is a deceiver who starts false religions for no reason. And you can ask a Muslim, why? Why would Allah deceive people? And the general response is going to be, to protect Jesus. Well, wait a minute. No, Jesus was safe in heaven. So there's no good purpose that comes out of deceiving people into thinking that Jesus died. The only thing that does happen as a result of that is that you get the largest false religion in the world. So the only result of Allah's deception is a bunch of misled, deceived people. And it's important to note, even Jesus' followers, who according to the Quran were Muslims, were apparently deceived by this, because Jesus' original followers came to believe that he died on the cross, and yet the Quran tells us that these people were good Muslims. So here you have Allah deceiving not only the enemies of Jesus, but he's also deceiving people who followed Jesus. And at that point, wait a minute, you've got a God who misleads and deceives even people who follow his prophets. How can anyone be safe? If you Muslims are following Muhammad, and you believe that Muhammad preached a God who willingly deceives even people who follow his prophets, how do you know he's not doing the same thing to you? Once you allow an omnipotent deceiver who starts false religions into your theology, I don't see how anyone can be safe. And this actually plays a role in the thinking of many Muslims. Abu Bakr was Muhammad's closest companion and the first rightly guided caliph after Muhammad died. He took over the leadership of the Muslim community after Muhammad died. And he said that if he had one foot in paradise, he would still fear Allah's deception. Now, just think about that. You have one of the best Muslims ever, Muhammad's closest companion, saying, if I was stepping into paradise, I would still fear that Allah was deceiving me. He was just going to cast me into hell, and he was just making me think I was getting into heaven. So this idea of a God who deceives people is really a disturbing one, but at the same time, it's something that most Muslims have never thought of, and so it's important to bring this up with Muslims to get them to think, why would Allah do that? Why would Allah deceive a bunch of people into believing a false doctrine that starts false religion?
Great insight there. Is the Allah of Islam the same as God the Father? I know that some Arab Christians or Southeast Asia Christians there are going to refer to God as Allah, but do they mean the same thing? Do Muslims mean the same thing when they're using the word Allah?
Well, it's kind of a yes and no situation. Allah can just be a generic word for God, like our word God. It can refer to God, or it can refer to false gods or something like that. So in one sense, it just means God, and also in one sense, if it depends on what you mean. If you're saying, well, Allah and God the Father are both believed to have created the universe, so they're creative, they're all powerful. Well, in that sense, they're the same. But there are some very important differences. For instance, the God of the God of the Bible is a Trinity. The God of Islam is not. That's totally ruled out. The God of Islam is a father to no one. That's according to the Quran. Over and over again, it's denied that we can call God Father. Whereas, of course, in the New Testament, we can refer to God as our Father. So, the highest relationship you can have in Islam with God is a master to slave relationship. There is no you would call God Father because you have become a child of God. You don't get to have that kind of relationship with Allah. Another important difference is in the attributes of God. So in Christianity, we're told to love everyone because God loves everyone. We're told that even while we were sinners, Christ died for us. So God loves us even when we're sinners. God loves us and loves our enemies, sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous, and tells us that we're supposed to do the same based on God's love. I'm supposed to love my enemies and to pray for those who persecute me. You find in Islam, just in case anyone thinks I'm making something up, you can look it up. Surah 3, verse 32 specifically says God does not love unbelievers. And you have verses like that throughout the Quran telling us all the various kinds of people that Allah just does not love. And that's a very crucial difference because think about it. In Matthew 5, Jesus tells us to love everyone because God loves everyone. Well, if Allah only loves good Muslims, which is, according to the Quran, that's how it is. Allah only loves good Muslims. Why should Muslims care much about all these people that Allah doesn't love? And of course, you find out in the Quran that Muslims can go out and fight and kill the unbelievers. And so you can see how theology affects the practice of believers. So you have the God of Christianity is a Trinity. Allah isn't. The God of Christianity loves everyone, even when we're sinners. Allah doesn't. But also on when it comes to other attributes, for instance, Allah's justice. Allah can just forgive you. It's totally up to Allah. He can just sweep your sins under the rug, and most Muslims believe that's what Allah is going to do at the end of time. So, you did a pretty good job. You were a good Muslim. You recited the Shahada, and you also committed a bunch of sins throughout your life. Well, Allah can kind of overlook those. Well, what that means is that in Islam, Allah's justice is not perfect. He can let some sin slide. At the end of time, there will be unpunished sin. Whereas in Christianity, God's justice is so perfect, God isn't going to let any sin slide. And so one of the main differences between Christianity and Islam is that Christianity, by maintaining that God is so just that all sin must be punished, and yet so loving and merciful that he's willing to pay that price himself, Christianity retains God's perfect attributes, while Islam diminishes and reduces both. God isn't perfectly just; he can let sin slide, and he's also not perfectly loving. He only loves good Muslims. So there are lots of differences between the biblical God and the God we read about in the Quran.
All right, well, talking about the Quran then, one of the beliefs in Islam is that Muhammad was divinely inspired to recite the Quran. What are the reasons that they would believe that?
Well, a Muslim can give all kinds of arguments for Islam. Interestingly, in the Quran, there are only a couple of arguments actually given in the Quran for why we should believe in Muhammad. One is that the Quran, the language of the Quran is so wonderful, it must actually come from God. And I mean, this is a very, very strange argument. I call it the argument from literary excellence, or less formally, the argument from good poetry, or something like that. And it basically amounts to, my poetry is better than your poetry, therefore my poetry must be the inspired poetry of God. And that is absurd on so many levels. I don't know how anyone could ever really take this argument seriously. I mean, think about it. Mozart's symphonies are so wonderful, they must come from God. And if you don't believe they're the best symphonies, produce something better than them. Well, I couldn't, and I don't know of anyone who could write symphonies better than Mozart's symphonies. But what in the name of common sense would that have to do with whether Mozart's symphonies are the inspired music of God? So far as I can tell, absolutely nothing. Best case scenario, it would mean that Mozart was the best symphony writer. It wouldn't mean that it's actually from God. And so even if we turned to the Quran and we found that it was the greatest thing, the most marvelous book ever written, I don't see how that would I don't see how that would prove that it must be from God. At best, it would just prove that Muhammad was really, really great. So in other words, it's an even if scenario. Even if this argument, even if Muhammad's book was the best, it still wouldn't mean it's from God. But in fact, when we actually turn to the Quran, we find that it's really just not that great. It's just not that great. And by the way, this argument impressed next to no one in Muhammad's time. So when Muhammad started preaching in Mecca, this was his argument. The Quran is so wonderful, it must be from God. And Muhammad won very few followers. With this as his argument. In fact, at the end of about 12 or 13 years of preaching, he had somewhere between 100 and 150 followers. So this wasn't exactly like a Billy Graham crusade of conversion here. But just to give listeners an idea of what a surah is, you have in the Quran, you have some are very short, some are very long. But according to Surah 2, verse 23, the challenge that's actually laid out runs as follows. If you are in doubt as to that which we have revealed to us. Now, that's the whole chapter. Or a Muslim will say, but in Arabic, in Arabic, it's basically the same thing as it is in English. It's a series of words put together to convey some kind of meaning. And what sense does it make to say, no human being could put these words in this order? Any human being could put words in a certain order. There's no arrangement of words that a human being couldn't come up with. So this argument is very, very, very strange, to say the least. But that's the argument that Muhammad relied on when he initially started preaching. Again, didn't work very well, didn't win very many followers. The other main argument we find in the Quran is what you could call the argument from biblical prophecy. That Muhammad said that Muhammad is mentioned in the previous scriptures. So in the Torah, it specifically says in Surah 7:157 that Muhammad is mentioned in the Torah and the Gospel, and that we can find him written in the Torah and the Gospel. Now, notice Muhammad's telling us something that we're going to find in the Torah and the Gospel. And if we don't find it there, that's a problem. I mean, imagine a prophet comes up to me and says, you want to know if I'm a prophet? Walk down by the river there and you'll see a big sign telling you that I'm a prophet. Well, if I walk down there and it's not there, you're wrong. And he obviously can't be a true prophet. So this has really put Muslims in a bind that there are supposed to be references to Muhammad in both the Torah and the Gospel that even Christians and Jews can find. But what happens when we actually, when we go to those sources? Well, we don't find anything about Muhammad. And it's actually a pretty rough situation because Muslims are kind of forced. They're kind of forced to find something that kind of sounds like it refers to Muhammad because Muhammad said it's there. So they're forced to find some reference to Muhammad in the Torah and some reference to Muhammad in the Gospel. And that's a problem because both these books, if you go to them, contradict the teachings of Islam. But after centuries of searching, Muslims have come up with several. The most popular, and I'd say the best, even though they're really, really bad to say that these are about Muhammad. But the best ones they've been able to come up with are one from the Gospel of John. Now think about how strange it is to appeal to the Gospel of John, which starts by saying the Word was with God and the Word was God, and the Word became flesh, and that Jesus died on the cross and so on. Imagine how strange it is to say to pick something from this book and to say this is talking about Muhammad and this is the clear proof of Muhammad, or something from the Old Testament saying that Muhammad is a prophet. But the most popular one from the New Testament is found in the Gospel of John, and starting at verse 15, Jesus says, "If you love me, you will keep my commandments. I will ask the Father, and he will give you another helper, that he may be with you forever." So Muslims totally rip this verse out of context and say this Muhammad is the helper or the comforter, depending on how you translate it. Muhammad is the comforter. And so Jesus here says that someone else is coming after him, and obviously this must be Muhammad. Now, I really wish Muslims would actually try reading it in context, because Jesus says all kinds of other things. I mean, right before, literally in the verse before this passage starts, Jesus says that he's going to answer prayers. Whatever we ask in his name, he'll do it. He goes on to say that he's going to send the Comforter. And so really in this situation, these verses that Muslims appeal to are always awesome opportunities to present the gospel and to actually refute Islam. So take this verse, for instance. If you read what Jesus says about the Comforter, he also says that he's the one who's going to send the Comforter. So you can ask the Muslim who's presenting this, hey, who sent Muhammad as a prophet? The Muslim obviously is going to say, Allah sent Muhammad. Okay, so Allah is the one who sent Muhammad. Interesting. Right here, Jesus says that he's going to send the Comforter. And you just told me that the Comforter is Muhammad. So according to your reasoning, Allah sends Muhammad. Muhammad is the Comforter. Jesus sends the Comforter. Therefore, according to you, what you just told me, Jesus must be Allah. Now, why are you rejecting Christianity? So there's that one where you can based on what the Muslim is saying, if he accepts that this is talking about Muhammad, then they just admitted that Jesus must be Allah. And you find something similar in the Old Testament. Muslims will appeal to Deuteronomy 18:18, where Moses predicted the coming of a prophet who would be like him. And Muslims say, aha, who's like Moses? Well, Muhammad's like Moses. Moses was a general and a prophet and a political leader, and Muhammad was these things too. And so they're like each other. Well, that's fine until you read two verses later, which gives us two criteria for a false prophet. In Deuteronomy 18:20, we find that if anyone does one of two things, he's a false prophet. And it's if the person delivers a revelation that doesn't come from God, or two, if the person speaks in the name of other gods, it is a false prophet and he has to die. That's interesting because Muhammad did both. And I don't mean, hey, I don't believe the Quran is the word of God, therefore I'm regarding it as a false revelation. That's not what I mean. I mean, Muhammad admitted that he delivered a false revelation. It's referred to now as the Satanic verses. So the Satanic verses, the basic story, is that when Muhammad was receiving a surah one day, he had this passage that said, have you not heard of Allat, Alus, and Manat? These were three pagan goddesses in Arabia. Have you not heard of Allat, Alus, and Manat, the third, the other? These are the exalted cranes whose intercession is to be hoped for. So they're called cranes because they're like birds who would carry your prayers up to Allah, and therefore they could intercede for you by bringing your prayers to God. So Muhammad received this revelation, he delivered it to his followers, and he bowed down in honor of receiving this revelation that it was now okay to pray to these three pagan goddesses. And this won him a lot of favor. At the very least, Muhammad couldn't tell the difference between a revelation from God and a revelation from Satan. That should be a concern to everyone. But I think more interestingly, when we connect that with Deuteronomy 18:18, which Muslims appeal to as their main prophecy about Muhammad in the Old Testament, 2 verses later says anyone who does what Muhammad did is a false prophet. If he delivers a false revelation, which Muhammad admitted he did, or he speaks in the name of other gods, which Muhammad admitted he did, it's a false prophet. And so it's interesting that Muslims claim to reverence Moses and all the other prophets when if Muhammad had delivered those satanic verses in the time of Moses, Moses would have told the people to pick up stones and stone Muhammad to death as a false prophet. So these are the main arguments that we find in the Quran, that Muslims would say this is how we know that the Quran is from God. It's unsurpassable literary excellence, which even the people of Muhammad's time ridiculed. They ridiculed him for this, for saying that his work is unsurpassable. And Muhammad said the Bible contains references to him when the best passages Muslims have ever found, if you read them a little more carefully and read them in context, turn out to refute Islam and expose Muhammad as a false prophet.
Well, very good. I think that helps a lot in showing even the counter response, which shows that these are not divinely inspired texts. Mm-hmm. I guess the other question is the Quran pro-war or not? For instance, what is the context of the verses that extreme Muslims would use to wage wars of terror, and what do you take those verses to mean? And is that a right interpretation of those verses? Is the Quran pro-war or not?
Well, the Quran is definitely pro-war in certain contexts, namely when Muslims have a majority, when Muslims dominate an area, when Muslims are able to fight, they are called to fight. And interestingly, Muslims are even commanded not to seek peace when they're in a position where they can become uppermost. So for Surah 47, by the way, for listeners, Surah means chapter. So Surah 47 verse 35 says, "Be not weary and faint-hearted, crying for peace when you should be uppermost." So don't look for peace when you are supposed to be in a position of dominance. But what you have in the Quran is you have verses spread throughout the Quran, of course. Some sound very peaceful and some sound very violent. Let me read a few to you. So Surah 2, verse 256, one of the most commonly quoted verses by Muslims here in the West, says, "There is no compulsion in religion." Well, that sounds good. We'd love that here in the West. There's no compulsion in religion. Don't force someone to believe. Wow, fits right in with the Constitution of the United States. But you also read Surah 9, verse 29, "Fight those who believe not in Allah." So notice, it doesn't say fight those who attack you first. It says fight those who believe not in Allah. Fighting people based on what they believe. Now, wait a minute. I thought there was no compulsion in religion. Why are you now commanding people to fight people simply because they don't believe in Allah? So another pair of verses here, Surah 109, "You shall have your religion, and I shall have my religion." That's the conclusion of the surah that we just read. "To you be your religion, and to me be my religion." Well, that's a great way of settling conflicts before bloodshed. You have your religion, I have mine. And then we read Surah 9:5, "So when the sacred months have passed away, then slay the idolaters wherever you find them." So we have passages that go in that can be interpreted peacefully, and you have passages that can be interpreted very violently. But what you have, and what most people in the West don't seem to understand, is that you have this doctrine of abrogation, whereby later verses can cancel earlier revelations. And in Islam, what we find, and this is based in the Quran, it's based in the Hadith, it's based on the life of Muhammad, when Muslims are in a position, when they are outnumbered, when they form a small minority of the population, they're taught to promote peace and tolerance towards unbelievers. That's what Muhammad did when he was in Mecca, when he was totally outnumbered, when he had maybe 100 followers, and if they had fought with the unbelievers, they would have been annihilated. That's when Muhammad receives revelation saying, "To you be your religion, and to me be my religion. We don't want to fight you. We want to live in peace." Later, when Muhammad had formed some alliances and he'd gathered more followers around him, then the revelation changed to saying that Muhammad could fight defensive jihad. So defensive jihad. Namely, if someone is attacking the Muslim community by various means, it can even be criticizing the Muslim community, then you can fight defensively. You don't go out and attack people just because they're unbelievers, but the Muslim community is commanded to rise up and defend itself against attacks, whether they're physical or verbal. But that's not the end, and lots of Muslims pretend that that's the end. There is another situation where Muslims are in a majority, where Muslims are dominant, and that's where Surah 9 comes into play, where Muslims are commanded to engage in offensive jihad. So now it's not fighting defensively against people who are attacking the community, it's fighting offensively against people based on their beliefs. So to quote Surah 9, verse 29, which I quoted the beginning of it, but let me read the entire verse. Notice every criterion in everyone in this verse, every reason given for fighting an unbeliever here has to do with that believer's belief or practice, has nothing to do with that person attacking the Islamic community. So Surah 929, fight those who believe not in Allah nor the last day. So if you don't believe in Allah, you don't believe in the final judgment, then Muslims are commanded to fight you. Nor hold that forbidden which hath been forbidden by Allah and His Messenger. So notice, if we don't forbid the same things which Muhammad has forbidden, Muslims are commanded to fight us. So if Christianity says it's okay to eat pork and Islam says you can't eat pork, well, Muslims have to fight us. Nor acknowledge the religion of truth. That's Islam. So if you don't acknowledge the superiority of Islam, then Muslims are commanded to fight you. Then it has, from among the people of the book, that's Jews and Christians, until they pay the jizya with willing submission and feel themselves subdued. So here in Surah 929, Muslims are commanded to fight Jews and Christians until we pay the jizya, which is basically a tax. We have it better than say, polytheists or Hindus or atheists. Since Muslims believe that we have received revelation, we have the privilege of continuing in our religion, provided we pay the Muslim community for protection and feel ourselves subdued. So we understand our inferior position. So this is Surah 929 commanding Muslims to fight us based on what we believe and what we practice, not based on whether we're attacking Muslims. So this is when things change. This is after Muhammad had conquered Mecca. He was the supreme authority in Mecca, and after he received this verse, he went out and launched an expedition against Christians who weren't attacking him. So Muhammad launched an expedition against the Roman Empire. The Romans didn't even show up. They weren't interested in fighting Muhammad or fighting for Arabia. They didn't want Arabia. But Muhammad went out to attack them. And so this is offensive jihad. Now we're actually going out to attack the unbeliever and force them to submit, either by converting to Islam or by paying us a tax. And this is what you find over and over again in Surah 9 and in other surahs that were revealed a little before this. But let me give you a couple of examples quickly. Surah 9, verse 73 says, O prophet, strive hard against the unbelievers and the hypocrites and be unyielding to them. Surah 9, verse 111, just in case someone wants to say, as I've heard in a debate before, well, fight there. When it says fight the unbelievers, that could just mean, not fighting them with swords, but maybe fighting them with words or engaging in public debate. No, it can't, because a little later in the same chapter, verse 111, Allah defines for us what fighting in Allah's way means. The verse says, surely Allah has bought of the unbelievers their persons and their property for this, that they shall have the garden. So Allah has purchased you. Now what are you going to do? They fight in Allah's way, so they slay and are slain. So fighting in Allah's way means you slay until you get slain. You fight and you keep fighting until you ultimately get killed. Surah 9, verse 123, O you who believe, fight those of the unbelievers who are near to you and let them find in you hardness. So you fight the unbelievers who are close by. And another interesting one, Surah 48, verse 29, says, Muhammad is the messenger of Allah, and those who are with him are severe against disbelievers and merciful among themselves. Muslims are severe against disbelievers. Notice, the reason for being severe against them is based on what they believe. Severe against disbelievers and merciful among who? Among everyone? No, among themselves. So this is what you find in the Quran later on when Muslims were dominant and had a military. The passages become dedicated to fighting unbelievers simply for being unbelievers. And you find the same thing in the Hadith, in Sahih Muslim, one of their most trusted collection of teachings from Muhammad. Muhammad says, I have been commanded to fight against people till they testify that there is no God but Allah. I've been commanded to fight against people till they testify that there is no God but Allah. So this isn't, I've been commanded to fight against people until they decide to live in peace with us. It's until they recite the Shahada, the Muslim creed. So this is what you find when you go through all of this and you understand how this relates to the context. When Muslims are in a minority, again, when Muslims are in a minority, peace and tolerance, when their numbers have risen to, say, maybe 20 or 30% of the population, then they can engage in defensive jihad. When they have a majority, then it's offensive jihad. People are forced to convert or forced to pay the jizya. And so if you look around just at the world, you can see how this plays out. You go to Saudi Arabia, you're not going to be preaching Christianity. You're not going to build a church. You're certainly you're not going to evangelize or tell people that Islam is false. You're not going to do any of that. You do not have that right. Why? Because Muslims have a majority in that country. If you come over here to the United States, Muslims say, peace and tolerance. We love to just hug each other and all this, and that's exactly what their religion commands them to do. Now, I just want to clarify, because I don't want people to say that I'm saying all Muslims are trying to deceive you or something. I'm not. Chances are, when a Muslim in the West tells you that Islam is a religion of peace, he actually believes that, because he's been influenced by Western values, and his leaders have told him that that's what Islam teaches. So I'm not talking about, a Muslim who lives down the street, who probably believes it when he tells you Islam is a religion of peace. Here we're talking about what Islam actually teaches, what Muhammad laid down in the Quran and in the Hadith. And the message from Muhammad is when you're in that minority position, you convince them that Islam is a religion of peace, and you can even engage in deception. That's Surah 3, verse 28 of the Quran, which commands Muslims not to be friends with unbelievers unless it's to guard themselves from unbelievers. So if you're a Muslim, you're not allowed to be a friend with an unbeliever unless you're doing it to deceive that unbeliever into thinking you're friendly. And one of Muhammad's companions even commented on that verse and said, we smile in the face of some people while our hearts curse them. So we're smiling at you, we're making you think we like you, but inwardly we're cursing you, longing for the day when we can conquer you and subjugate you. And so again, I'm not saying this is what your average Western Muslim believes. The average Muslim you'll run into in the West is a perfectly nice, perfectly kind individual. But what Islam teaches, this is some diabolical. I have two revelations from Allah that seem to conflict with one another in what they're telling you to do. You go with the most recent one. So it's it's a pretty simple concept. If you have two verses in conflict, like there's no compulsion in religion versus fight those who believe not in Allah, well, those seem to be in conflict. What do? According to the doctrine of abrogation, you go with the most recent one, because Allah only gives you something better than what He's abrogated or equal to it. And this is actually based in the Quran itself. Surah 2, verse 106 says, whatever communications we abrogate or cause to be forgotten, we bring one better than it or like it. Do you not know that Allah has power over all things? So Allah abrogates certain teachings and brings ones that are better than it. And Surah 16, verse 101 says, and when we change one communication for another communication, and Allah knows best what He reveals, they say you are only a forger. Nay, most of them do not know. So this specifically refers to Allah changing one revelation for another revelation. And it's interesting, if you go to the commentaries, the Muslim commentaries on both of these verses, both of these verses were revealed in the context of unbelievers making fun of Muhammad for changing his revelation. So Muhammad tells people to do one thing one day, and he comes back a couple months later and then changes the revelation. And unbelievers started making fun of them, saying, hey, he keeps changing his revelations. What's going on with Allah? And that's when these revelations came down and said, yes, Allah does change His revelations, but it's because he's giving something better. Now, for Muslims who say that the doctrine of, and I hear this all the time, it's in the West that you hear it. You don't hear this in Saudi Arabia. That there is no doctrine of abrogation. The Quran is complete and perfect and everything else. That's either a Muslim who has no clue what he's talking about, or it's a Muslim who is deliberately trying to deceive you. Most likely the former. It's most likely a Muslim who doesn't know the Quran and doesn't know what the real issues are. And just to give you a simple example, Surah 4, verse 115 gives a penalty for fornication. If someone commits fornication, Surah 4, verse 15 says that the penalty for fornication is house arrest until death. So you get locked in your house until death. That's what Surah 4, verse 15 says. Surah 24:2 also gives the penalty for fornication, and it's 100 lashes. Now, wait a minute. One surah tells you that if someone commits fornication, lock them up in their house until they die, eventually. And Surah 24:2 says that if you commit fornication, the penalty is 100 lashes. Now, if you're telling me there's no doctrine of abrogation, you're telling me there's just a contradiction in the Quran. There was no problem for this in the early Muslim community because they understood this doctrine of abrogation. If you go to the Hadith, you go to Sahih al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, their most trusted collections, abrogations all over the place. This verse came down, but it got abrogated by this. No, that verse came down, but it was abrogated by this. Sometimes the abrogation was almost instant. A verse comes down, someone complains, and then another verse comes down. So this is all over all of the Muslim sources. You go to the commentaries, you go to their greatest commentators, Ibn Kathir, the two Jalals, Ibn Abbas, abrogation is all over the place. No, this verse was abrogated by that one. And so you really need this because there are all these passages in the Quran which are contradictions, but for the early Muslim community, they're not contradictions because Allah just gave you something better than what he said before. But Muslims in the West, they're actually doing it. They're actually doing it for a reason. But when they say there's no abrogation, then it's interesting because now they're stuck with all these contradictions. The real reason, I think, for denying abrogation, laying ignorance aside, your average Muslim who denies abrogation isn't trying to deceive you. He probably believes there's no abrogation because he doesn't know about all these problems and contradictions in the Quran. But what a Muslim who knows better and says there's no abrogation, they're doing that for a reason, and the main reason is you have two basic methods of interpreting the Quran. We'll call one the classical method of Quranic interpretation, which is based on abrogation. You have two verses that are in conflict, go with the most recent one. And then you have, in order to be presented as a religion of peace here in the West, you can't have the peaceful verses getting abrogated by later verses. You need the peaceful verses to still be in effect. And so the method that Muslims are adopting and are claiming actually represents Islam here in the West is to harmonize the verses somehow. So if you're talking to a Muslim for the first, let's say, 10 centuries of Islam, and you say, hey, this Quran here, it says, to you be your religion and to me be my religion. There's no compulsion in religion. Why are you Muslims going out and fighting people? Anyone from the first 10 centuries of Islam is going to say, because those verses were canceled by a later verse commanding us to fight to fight non-Muslims and to subjugate them. That's why. Those earlier revelations were canceled or abrogated by these later verses commanding us to fight. That's how a classical Muslim is going to interpret these passages. Here in the West, you don't want to say there's no compulsion in religion has been abrogated. You don't want to say to you be your religion and to me be my religion has been canceled. And so they'll harmonize it and say, aha, there's no compulsion in religion. That's the official doctrine of Islam. That's our official teaching about how Islam is to deal with unbelievers. No compulsion in religion. But what about this verse over here that says, fight those who do not believe in Allah? Well, now that we're harmonizing verses, we have a verse which tells us that we don't fight people because of what they believe. Therefore, when Surah 929 tells us to fight people based on what they believe, it must mean something else. It has to mean something else because we're interpreting these violent verses in the light of these peaceful verses. And so this verse, which tells Muslims to fight, must mean fight in self-defense, even though that's not what it says. So the idea behind getting rid of abrogation is that you can now retain the peaceful verses that were revealed early on in Muhammad's ministry when he was still a minority in Mecca.
Well, David, I know you've been involved in many debates on the subject, as you mentioned earlier. So I wonder what you think are some of the better arguments for the side of Islam.
This is actually kind of a difficult question because what we think of as a great Christian apologist is very different from what passes for a great Muslim apologist. And in the Muslim world, and I've gotten this just from being in so many debates and watching many more, in Christianity, our best apologists, they certainly have a debating ability. Debating is a skill. You can have someone who knows all the apologetics in the world, but isn't going to do very well when up on stage, having to think quickly on their feet and so on. So debating is a skill, but our best apologists seem to be people who have the best arguments and can defend those arguments best. In Islam, their best apologists, the people they regard, even historically, as their best apologists. So historically, many Muslims regard Ahmed Deedat as their best apologist. And now many Muslims will say, Zakir Naik is their best apologist. But when you look at their arguments, the arguments are absolutely horrible. But the communicators are phenomenal. So Zakir Naik and Deedat and really all of the popular Muslim apologists, horrible argumentation, but great speakers. And that tends to be the ideal Muslim apologist, someone who can give you a horrible argument but makes it sound so good that it sounds really persuasive and convincing. And I want to be clear here. I'm not saying their arguments are horrible because I disagree with Islam. I can recognize a good argument or a plausible argument, even if it's something I disagree with. So just to give you an example, the problem of evil. I don't believe that the argument from evil actually shows that God doesn't exist, but it's not a dumb argument. It's not a dumb argument to say, if you're telling me a perfectly good, perfectly powerful being exists, why is there so much pointless suffering around the world? That's not a dumb argument. It makes sense to argue that. The question is, how do Christians respond to it? But the argument itself isn't bad. When we turn to Islam, I don't see a good argument. So we already looked at two, the two main arguments given by the Quran. This argument from literary excellence and supposed prophecies about Muhammad in the Bible. And both of those arguments are horrible. And if the Muslim takes them seriously, would actually refute Islam. So those are the arguments offered by the Quran. But the other popular arguments that Muslims use, the most popular are the argument from scientific accuracy. So the Quran is supposedly a scientific masterpiece that contains many scientific insights that were centuries ahead of its time. And the argument from perfect preservation, which says the Quran has been perfectly preserved. That's a miracle. It's obviously the word of God. And, regarding the science, I don't know what book they're reading. I open up the Quran, and Surah 18, verse 86 tells us that Alexander the Great, which the Quran refers to as Qu'ran traveled so far west, he found the place where the sun sets and found it setting in a pool of murky water. So according to the Quran, if you travel far enough west, you'll actually find the place where the sun sets, and the sun sets in a pool of murky water. Surah 67:5 and 37:6 through 10, they tell us that stars are missiles that God uses to shoot demons when they try to sneak into heaven. That the stars you see up in the sky, they're missiles waiting to be thrown at demons trying to sneak into heaven. And then when you see a shooting star, it's because God actually hurled one of these stars at a demon. Now that's wrong on multiple levels. Shooting stars aren't really stars, and shooting stars have nothing to do with hitting demons that try to sneak into Allah's meeting room. And you find over and over again in the Quran these kinds of problems. Surah 65:12 says that there are these 7 earths, and according to the commentaries, they're all flat. They're stacked up like pancakes, except they have some space in between them. Surah 88:20 says that the earth is flat. 22:65 says that the sky is actually a solid object that Allah is holding up. If Allah weren't holding up the sky would fall on us. And over again in the Quran, you find these problems at every level. So those were all astronomy, but, with embryological development, Surah 86, for instance, says that semen is produced between the ribs and the spine. So I don't know what book Muslims are reading when they say this is a scientific masterpiece. These are, really, some of these are really, really absurd teachings. The idea that you could travel a ways west and find the place where the sun sets, or that stars are missiles. So that's a really, really poor argument. And, the other, this argument that the Quran has been perfectly preserved, and therefore it's from God. Well, here again we find an even if, but in fact situation. Even if the Quran were perfectly preserved, that wouldn't mean that it's from God. We have books that are older than the Quran. You have manuscripts of books that are older than the Quran. So you have entire manuscript. Let's say manuscripts of the Bible. You have manuscripts of the Bible that are older than 1,400 years. And so if it's a miracle to survive, for a book to survive 1,400 years, then you could prove that any book that has a really old manuscript must be the Word of God. So even if this were the case, even if the Quran were perfectly preserved, it wouldn't mean it's from God. But then if we actually go to the Muslim sources themselves, we find all kinds of evidence that there were changes, that entire chapters came up missing, that large sections of chapters came up missing, that verses came up missing, and some of it's actually hilarious. For instance, the verse of stoning. We know that Muslims stone people for adultery, but that's not in the Quran. It was supposed to be in the Quran. It was revealed. And so we ask, wait a minute, in the Hadith it says there's this verse in the Quran about stoning. What happened to it? Well, according to their own history books, Aisha, Muhammad's wife, had the copy of it. So it was written down, this verse of stoning an adulterer, and a goat came in and ate the manuscript, and so they didn't have it anymore. And you have all kinds of situations like that in Islam where, hey, everyone lost these chapters. We didn't recite these two large chapters, and now we forgot them. So it's situations where Muslims walk in and make an argument, let's say on a college campus. Hey, the Quran's been perfectly preserved. How's that possible? And people actually convert based on some of these arguments, and they're totally wrong. The slightest bit, 10 minutes of research would show that is totally, totally false. And so I'm not aware of any actually good arguments or arguments that I'd be willing to classify as the best arguments for Islam. If I were a Muslim, I would use what I think is their most successful approach in the West, which is to keep things on a really, really superficial level. And lots of the converts I meet, the people who've converted to Islam, converted based on something like this. Hey, look at Christianity. It's so complicated. You can't understand the Trinity. What is that? What's going on with the Trinity? Incarnation. You mean God came out of a woman? What's going on with that? Now God's dying for your sins. That means it's okay to sin. Look at all this stuff. It's so weird in Christianity. In Islam, we just believe in one God who created heaven and the earth. This God tells you to repent and serve him, and then you can live a good life and go to heaven. So look at Christianity. It's got so much weird stuff. Islam doesn't get that weird, so convert to Islam. I think that's really the best that they've got. Now, the problem, of course, is Islam is a package deal. It's not just the belief that God created the world and we're going to strip it from all the weird stuff that Christians believe. Islam is a package deal consisting of not just submission to Allah, but you have to submit to Muhammad as well. And when you look at the rest of the teachings of Muhammad and Muhammad's life and the rules laid down by Muhammad, I can't imagine anyone converting to Islam after doing a genuinely careful study of Islam. And I think that's important to point out. I've met a ton of converts to Islam. I've never met a convert to Islam who did anything remotely resembling a careful investigation of Islam prior to converting. It's always, I heard this argument and I converted. Or if it's a woman, lots of times you'll hear, hey, I got sick of guys hooting and hollering at me as I walked around in my miniskirt, and I talked to my Muslim friend. She said, hey, if I become a Muslim, guys will respect me because I'll wear the hijab. And so that's why I converted. And so it's these sort of very, very superficial reasons for converting that totally ignore all the difficulties with Islam. And that's how Muslims are approaching this in the West. I think it's wrong. I think it's wrong to convert for those reasons. And I think it's deceptive to present Islam in that way. But that seems to be their best approach.
Well, I wonder what sort of resources you would want to point Christians to who want to be better equipped to engage on this subject of Islam.
It's we have a tendency to just go to books. What's the best book to go to on Islam? And I'll be honest, there aren't a lot of books about Islam and about dealing with Muslim arguments out there that I'm impressed with. Probably the best book out there is Norm Geisler and Abdul Salib's Answering Islam, which is almost 2 decades old now. But even that, to the people who are out there debating Muslims, knows that there are some much stronger responses that can be given to some of the issues than what you find in Answering Islam. Answering Islam. Now, don't get me wrong here. I think it's a great book. The first third, where it explains Islamic beliefs, phenomenal. Best introduction to Islam out there. And in fact, Muslims will tell you, if a Muslim reads the first third of that book, they'll say, yes, this is what Islam teaches. This is an excellent introduction to Islam. And even lots of the responses in there are very good. But so when I say that I'm not impressed with a lot of the books out there, what I mean is a lot of the responses are incomplete. Now, let me give you an example. So on the issue of the corruption of the Bible, almost every Muslim you'll meet and you start talking about what Christianity teaches, you're going to hear the Bible's been corrupted. And since apologetics in the West has grown out of this atmosphere of skepticism and atheism and so on, where that's our target audience, the natural response to the claim the Bible's been corrupted is to go to something like textual criticism, show you manuscripts, show you how we can prove the accuracy of the text. But if you're dealing with Muslims, that's an incomplete approach. That is, I mean, horribly incomplete. If a Muslim says, David, the Bible has been corrupted, the first thing I'm going to say is, wait a minute, your Quran in Surah 6, verse 115, and Surah 18:27, both declare that no one can corrupt God's word. So the Quran teaches, doesn't it, that the Torah and the Gospel are God's word? Yes, it does. So if the Torah and the Gospel are God's word, and your Quran also says that no one can corrupt God's word, why are you just telling me that the Gospel's been corrupted? You just contradicted your Quran. And over again, Muslims who are criticizing the Gospel generally don't know this because they don't know enough about the Quran. But over and over again, the Quran tells us to go to the Torah and tells us to go to the Gospel, presupposing that we have the Torah and the Gospel. So Surah 5, verse 47, for instance, says, let the people of the Gospel judge by what Allah hath revealed therein. If any do fail to judge by the light of what Allah hath revealed, they are no better than those who rebel. So this verse actually commands Christians, which it calls the people of the Gospel, to judge by what's in the Gospel. Well, wait a minute. What's the Gospel? I don't know of any other book other than the New Testament Gospels. And even if a Muslim wants to say, well, Gospel of Thomas or some book that comes way later than the actual New Testament Gospels, those don't agree with Islam either. There is no gospel anywhere. Even the Gnostic Gospels or anything else, there's nothing out there that agrees with Islam. So what gospel is this commanding me to judge by? In context, telling a Christian, because this is directed towards Christians, Christians believe in the New Testament Gospels, which tell us that Jesus is the divine Son of God who died on the cross for sins and rose from the dead, all of which are denied by Islam. So kind of the first step when a Muslim says the Bible's been corrupted would be, well, wait a minute, according to your Quran, it hasn't been corrupted, and no one can corrupt it. It's a sign of Allah's power that no one can corrupt His word. If you're telling me that someone has corrupted His word, you're telling me that the Quran is wrong for telling me to believe in the gospel, and you're telling me Allah is not as powerful as the Quran claims. Is that what you're doing? And then the Muslim's in trouble. Now, after you've gotten that kind of out of the way, then you can show, hey, in fact, your Quran's right when it says the Bible hasn't been corrupted. Here's some evidence for the reliability of the New Testament. And, going on from there, if the conversation proceeds, at the end of the day, the only claim you can make about the Bible, about the Gospels being corrupted, you could say, well, there are textual variants. That's true. There are textual variants in the manuscript. And you could say there were some disputes about certain books historically. So there were people who questioned, say, 2 Peter as part of the canon. But now, if that's your criterion for a corrupt book, textual variants and disputes about certain books, well, then the Quran fails that test. There are all kinds of textual variants of the Quran, and Uthman actually burned all the manuscripts to try and cover up all the textual variants. And beyond that, Surah 1, Surah 113, and Surah 114, according to Muhammad's greatest expert on the Quran, the one Muhammad said, if you want to learn from the Quran from anyone, you go to him and these 3 other guys. Muhammad's top expert of the Quran, the one who, according to Muhammad, we should go to if we want to learn the Quran, he said those chapters aren't supposed to be in the Quran. They're not part of the Quran. They're prayers. So that's what a more complete response to an objection would look like. And I really don't find any books out there that give these kind of full responses. But this isn't to say that you don't have the resources out there. It was to say that the best resource is not in actually any of the published books out there. It's actually a website, and that's answering-islam.org. So the Answering Islam website has a ton of writers. I write for that website. Sam Shamoun, my partner, is the main writer for that website. But answering-islam.org, I'd say the best resource out there. You can find any argument for Islam. You'll find decisive refutations. Any objection a Muslim is going to give against Christianity, I guarantee you'll find it on that website refuted. And so that just the level of argumentation on the Answering Islam website is much better than I've seen anywhere else. So if people really want to learn about Islam and how to respond to Muslim questions, Muslim objections, Muslim arguments, that would be the best. And the other would be, and it's kind of necessary, getting some of the Muslim sources. So at the very least, you need a good translation of the Quran. And if you really want to be thorough, maybe some of their main collections of hadith. Now they have tons of collections of stories about Muhammad, but their 2 most reliable are Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. Generally, if you meet a Muslim, those are considered as good as gold. And in case people don't know the difference, the Quran isn't supposed to be a work of history about Muhammad. It's supposedly a revelation that was in heaven and that was passed down to Muhammad via the angel Gabriel. So the Quran isn't really supposed to be about Muhammad, except in a very limited way. It's supposed to be a revelation that came directly from God. It's actually the hadith, which are different works, which contain the life of Muhammad, stories about Muhammad, teachings about Muhammad, because for Muslims, those are authoritative too. The Quran, the Word of God, is authoritative, but other things Muhammad said are authoritative as well. And what Muhammad did in various situations, those things are also authoritative. So getting a good copy of the Quran, getting the hadith, at least a couple of the major ones that Muslims respect, those would be essentials. And fortunately, if you don't have money to go out buying a bunch of Muslim books, these are all available online. You can find links to those on the Answering Islam website as well, where you can get 10 different translations of the Quran online easily. Sahih al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim are online. Their greatest commentary, the tafsir, or the commentary of Ibn Kathir, their most respected commentator, that's available online along with several other sources. So basically, the best resource for learning about Islam and dealing with arguments out there would be a computer and internet access, and just knowing how to separate sort of the good sites from the bad.
Well, great. David, you've shared a gold mine of really helpful information, so I would want to point people to your own website as well. Could you mention what that is?
Well, my blog is answeringmuslims.com. So answeringmuslims.com, and for carefully laid out, detailed arguments, like detailed articles, the Answering Islam site is much better. So if you have a specific objection that you're trying to deal with, or a question about Christianity that a Muslim has asked you, Answering Islam would be the place to go. That's answering-islam.org. But for debates and videos and current events, things like that, we post all of that on our blog. And so if you're more interested in videos, YouTube videos, debates, things like that, then the blog is answeringmuslims.com.
Well, perfect. David, thanks so much for taking the time to speak with me today.
All right. Thank you for everything you're doing for apologetics there, Brian.
I've been speaking with David Wood of Acts 17 Apologetics Ministries. You can find links to David's resources at today's blog post at apologetics315.com. If you've enjoyed this interview, please share it with a friend via Facebook or Twitter. And if you haven't yet become a friend of Apologetics 315 on Facebook, head over to facebook.com/apologetics315 today and click on like. You can also follow on Twitter at twitter.com/apologetics315, and there you'll get a steady stream of apologetics-related links. And be sure to subscribe to the Apologetics 315 interviews in iTunes, as podcast episodes are released weekly, one day in advance of their blog posting. This is Brian Auten of Apologetics 315, and thanks for listening.